So I found this quote by a very important economist in the past that illuminates what I believe is America's economic fate in the future. Now, I can't say exactly when, but I do think people like Jerome Powell are aware of the dire circumstances. But, these politicians, they're professional propagandists twisting narratives to keep the wage slave docile and plugged into the matrix. And we can't have any economic upheavals now, right? But JP isn't perfect, and we'll talk about one interesting glitch he had in recent times. We're also going to check out some global M2 change over time as well. And if you think the US had it bad, the rest of the world is even worse. And with each passing day, more people realize there's only one way out. Are you one of them? It's Sir Ulrich, and are you down with the underground? Let's start by reading this quote by Ludwig von Mises from his book, Human Action. But then, finally, the masses wake up. They become suddenly aware of the fact that inflation is a deliberate policy and will go on endlessly. A breakdown occurs. The crack-up boom appears. Everybody is anxious to swap his money against real goods, no matter whether he needs them or not, no matter how much money he has to pay for them. Within a very short time, within a few weeks or even days, the things that were used as money are no longer used as media of exchange. They become scrap paper, scrap digital entries. Nobody wants to give anything away against them. It was this that happened with the continental currency in America in 1781, with the French mandats territoriaux in 1796, I hope I said that right, and with the German mark in 1923. It will happen again when the same conditions appear. If a thing has to be used as a medium of exchange, public opinion must not believe that the quantity of this thing will increase beyond all bounds. Inflation is a policy that cannot last. You've heard the cultist trope, Bitcoin fixes this, but fixes what exactly? Well, in short, incentives. Our incentives are naturally correlated to our environment. And there are some things in our environment that seem like a constant when they are actually very deep set variables. And if those variables change, like the very nature of money, so too do the incentives of every economic participant. You, me, the local drugstore, the publicly traded company, the nation state. And in this fiat-dominated world, the chief fiat is the dollar, and it's owned by the United States of America. Now, we say fiat currencies are backed by guns, but in reality, the guns are primarily symbolic. They're a threat of violence with some obvious exceptions. Countries don't shoot their people in other countries nearly as much as they used to. Instead, they prefer to posture and position like a conservative game of chess, 4D chess even. By the way, did you happen to see my last video? Make sure to watch it after this one. And we have seen some shooting, some scarier shooting during the month of June. Israel missiles at Iran, Iran missiles at Israel, US dropping bunker busters in Iran, Iran fake attacking US bases, no radiation detected at bunker buster bombing sites, and things then go back to normal clown world. All those missiles and all that fuel, that's a lot of money expended for a big nothing burger. But this is the norm in the fiat world. And I know you've seen the memes where the missiles are flying in both directions, claiming that your taxes are not only attacking one side, but defending the other. But let me remind you of this. The US deficit is $2 trillion. The defense budget is $1 trillion. Those missiles, they ain't your taxes. They're a hidden devaluation of the money in your bank, in your paycheck, so the government can do whatever the hell they want to do. Now, can we just take a step back for a moment? Why do they need to print money to operate the government? Why can't the government just stop spending so much? Why do they feel the need to force artificial inflation upon people that, it wasn't really even a thing until the world went off the gold standard in 1971? Isn't it funny? Remember the old saying, money doesn't grow on trees? That has roots in the late 19th century, before the time of central banking, democracy, and the total war age. It's definitely not relevant nowadays, unless, you're of the mindset that Bitcoin is the only true money we know. After all, the people in charge of this paper, they can't even tell you why they do what they do. I mean, why is 2% inflation such an important target? Can anyone tell me? Maybe Mr. Powell knows.
For the general public, for those working families and people, why 2%? Why is getting it to 2% so important?
So that has become the globally agreed, essentially all major central banks target 2% inflation in one form or another.
How does that help my Nevada families? How does that help people in Nevada?
I'll tell you how it does. And it's I guess it's obviously not, it's not obvious how that is, but 2% inflation, to have people believe that inflation is going to go back to 2% really anchors inflation there, because the evidence is and the modern belief is that people's expectations about inflation actually have an effect on inflation. If you expect inflation to go up 5%, then it will. If everyone kind of expects that, because that's what businesses and households will be expecting, and it'll kind of happen because they expect it. So having a 2% inflation goal, which we had for many years.
No, that was not AI. He was stuttering like Sophie Cunningham just threatened to choke him out if he didn't behave.
And just when I thought I could palm it,
you better drop to your knees and bark like you want.
But even a more serious question. Okay, that's enough of Sophie. If the US targeting 2% inflation is all that matters, and this global economy is no one counting the other nations that are even in a worse death spiral than the USA. Look at this chart showing monetary expansion over the last 10 years. And look, I'm not showing you since 1971 because frankly, we talk about that all the time. No one cares. It's too long ago. People don't feel it. And I'm not showing you since 2000 because, well, most of us, including me, we were kids back then. We weren't thinking about money at that time. But, 10 years ago, thinking about our demographic, you can feel that, right? You were there. You were making adult decisions. You remember that bad date you went on. You remember that vacation you went on. It should hit home a bit more, right? So let me ask you, in the last 10 years, if you're living in the USA, have you increased your earnings or net worth by more than 83% to keep up with the M2 expansion here? Now, I did, but will I in the next 10 years? Thank God for Bitcoin, because if you're not in that position, you're literally getting robbed by the government and there's nothing you can do about it. There's no government service, no public education, no subsidized healthcare or federal program to justify your share of the economy being cut almost in half every decade. And if you live in Israel or Russia, look at that. What the hell is that inflation? This is saying that there's more money created in the last 10 years than both of those countries' entire history for the currency that they're currently using. But for a common person, a normie just living their life, they don't even think about this stuff, It's all Netflix and social media and new American restaurants. The amount of monetary creation, not just in the US, but everywhere, is astronomical. It's the reason you can't buy a house. It's the reason you will die if you don't get a raise. It's the reason you'll be a wage slave much longer than your parents were. But people my age and younger, the inability to own things just isn't painful enough to make a change. And they knew this, The Keynesian economists knew you didn't need to own a home. You just needed someone to provide shelter. You didn't need to afford food. You just needed to be fed. You don't need to secure your future. You just needed to be entertained. Your government, your politicians, they couldn't do this to the money unless you allowed them to. Your ignorance of money, your skepticism of Bitcoin enables them to steal right from under your nose. Your government thinks you don't deserve the money you earn, and that's why they take it from you in secret. The things they want to do is simply more important. You want to buy a home, but they want to build missiles. You want to buy quality food, but they want to create government programs that keep you dependent on them. They'll create narratives that make you believe their way is the best or only way. Why do police forces need to be run by the government? Why can't local neighborhoods just hire their own security forces? And they'd probably do a better job because they run the risk of being fired and replaced for the next one if they don't. And another thing, why do we need to corporately fund extremist universities and schools that have evolved into temples of Marxism? Why can't they just all be completely private? And then all the universities can do and say whatever they want, just like any other religious organization, because that's what they are now. Why does one country need to pay for the military of another country? It don't make sense. US citizens, that money that's going to NATO for whatever the hell they do is part of the reason why your meat and bread prices are going up. And to fight that inflation, the food companies are adding chemicals and unnatural things to American food so you don't know what's happening. I'll tell you this right now, Bitcoin and fiat do not mix. We always say that on the Pleb Underground. This is a battle that will happen faster than you think. One's gonna die and the other one's gonna continue on for who knows how long. But think of this with regards to fiat currencies. It's like having a segmented internet, right? It's like where there's one protocol that's us and another one for, let's just say, Australia. And then to communicate, we have to go through the Bureau of International Information Exchange if you wanted to learn about a damn wallaby. It would be crazy. It would be needless friction just to acquire data, which slows down our progress as a species. Rather, there is one internet, and on top of it, there are domains of various sizes and functions and accesses. Fiat has natural friction and natural disincentives like the dystopian internet I just described. Why can't I send economic value to a friend in Singapore quickly and easily with minimal cost and peer-to-peer? Because we aren't using an open standard of value exchange agnostic to whomever is wearing a crown at the moment. I mean, do normies not realize how valuable that is? That we have technology now that you can send money that you earn to anywhere in the world at an open free market cost. And that could only be achieved through Bitcoin. Oh, and by the way, not Putin, nor Trump, nor Kim Jong-un, nor that woman running the Europeans can print more of it to do whatever they want for free. Every action has a cost. It's just a matter of making sure the right people are paying for it. Did you know what I just described is a big chunk of what gives Bitcoin its market value? Scarcity is important, yes, but no, scarcity by itself does not equal value like Michael Dell said. It's the unstoppable features. Let me make this clear. If your world leaders want to stop Bitcoin, the time chain is replicated thousands of times in unknown parts of the world. So go ahead and try to hunt all those down. But hey, please destroy our ability to generate electricity globally, kill the internet, and let's go back to the Stone Age. How will those homogeneous international laws and globalism plans work out without digital IDs and techno surveillance? Nope. Bitcoin will continue to live adjacent to whatever authoritarian schemes that can be imagined. One is choice, the other is chains. It was Henry Kissinger that said, "He who controls money controls the world." So with the advent of Bitcoin, it saved the world from being in control of any one entity in perpetuity. And you may ask why, like that doesn't make sense to some people, I'm sure. But remember, Bitcoin is finite and scarce, like we just mentioned. So in order to exert power in a Bitcoin standard world where Bitcoin is money, you have to spend resources, the Bitcoin. And when you spend resources, if you don't have accretive inflows, you will run out of money. You have to spend less than you bring in, and you just can't make more of it, right? And if you have some, let's just say you have some layer 2 solution for scaling, any debasing of a future token that's backed or on top of Bitcoin will be seen by everyone because Bitcoin is fully auditable every time a block is mined. So participants will immediately lose trust if you do any funny business. On a Bitcoin standard with money almost perfectly protected from theft, a dictator cannot steal enough to preserve any false dominance. On a Bitcoin standard, the only true way to keep any power is to continually provide a free market net value to others. Can Bitcoin change the world? Based on that, yeah, definitely. And in some ways, it already has. But there are so many mental slaves out there that worship the ruling elite, not realizing the power you have as individuals. And, most of the world has forfeited that power a long time ago. Like, for example, the only reason that guns haven't been banned here in America is not because of some archaic Bill of Rights. It's because they that would take the guns know that the people who have them won't give them up that easy. A segment of Americans are just built different than the Europeans and the Asians and the Russians that hardly have any gun ownership rights at all. Now, of course, there are exceptions of both sides. I am generalizing here. The Bible describes God in Deuteronomy as visiting the iniquities of the fathers on the children and the children's children to the 3rd and 4th generation. Look what an outsourcing of personal responsibility and the lack of understanding first principle natural order has done to generations of people under authoritarian regimes. I mean, 90% of the world right now is either burning or in chains, right? It's not a stretch to call this state of existence a multi-generational curse on worshiping earthly rulers like gods. We've been doing it for hundreds of years with no signs of stopping. Imagine if the Europeans, the Chinese, the Russians, Indians, the Americans even, didn't so quickly and easily give up the rights to defend themselves. You know, I think we would have a little less Stockholm syndrome and a little more liberty throughout the world. And through liberty of action and thought, we find real peace. Now, the only way to truly take back your freedom in 90% of the world is in the digital realm, and it won't be easy. But governments will go broke trying to police the use of Bitcoin if they try, just like if the USA tried to confiscate all the privately owned guns. The only way to bring an end to gun ownership is if they use the media to convince you to feel bad for owning it and turn it in yourself. This is the same thing with Bitcoin. It's bad for the environment. Criminals use it. It's volatile. But we are in 2025 now, and if it's so bad, why do they own it themselves? Your US government, other governments, respected financial institutions like BlackRock, Fidelity own it. Billionaires own it. They're not going to jail. And the barrier to entry to own it yourself is as low as plugging in a USB. Damn. If you don't take a step back and ask yourself, am I literally plugged into the matrix? Is my head buried in the sand so much that I've lost basic logical reasoning? Maybe I am a normie. Maybe I should turn off social media. Maybe I should turn off the mainstream media. Maybe after hearing Ulrich talk about Bitcoin for over half a decade, I should listen. Yeah, maybe.